Hey everyone, welcome back to Steve's View. Today we're diving deep into the latest developments in the ongoing US-China trade saga. In a move that grabbed headlines around the world, President Donald Trump has signed an executive order that officially extends the US-China trade truce. But what does this really mean for American businesses, Chinese manufacturers, and the global economy? Let's break it down in detail. A few days ago, during a White House press conference, reporters asked Trump whether a trade truce had been reached following negotiations in Stockholm. Trump responded with a cautious, "Let's see," indicating that not everything between the two sides had been fully agreed upon yet. Soon after, Chinese officials quickly announced that a truce had been reached, but some U.S. observers, including former Finance Minister Yellen, suggested that might have been a bit premature. Fast forward to August 11th. Just hours before the previous trade truce was set to expire, Trump signed the executive order extending the trade pause. So what's actually in this order? In simple terms, the existing tariffs on Chinese goods remain in place, but new tariff increases are paused for the next 90 days, giving both sides time to continue negotiations. Here's what the White House press release clarified. The 10% reciprocal tariffs on Chinese goods are still in effect. This is the part that often gets misreported. Some media outlets suggested that all tariffs were rolled back. That's not true. Only the newly planned increases were temporarily paused. Other existing tariffs on Chinese imports remain unchanged. Both countries committed to continuing negotiations to resolve trade disputes and strengthen economic ties. So while it may look like Trump gave in to China, the reality is more nuanced. Some Chinese media figures, like Hu Xijin of the Global Times, have painted this as a victory for China, claiming that the U.S. is now in a weaker position. According to them, China's hardline approach, including temporary restrictions on rare earth exports, shocked the U.S. and left a lasting impression. Let's put that in context. Trump first launched his trade war with China in 2018, escalating tariffs through 2019 and beyond. Back then, China was considered somewhat disadvantaged in the trade balance and bargaining power. But fast forward to today, China's economic and industrial capabilities have strengthened considerably, limiting the U.S.'s leverage. However, it's critical to understand the numbers behind the tariffs. Some reports confuse the public by focusing only on the 10% tariff. In reality, U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods average around 55% when you combine several layers. 10% baseline tariffs applied to imports from China and reciprocally to other nations for equal treatment. Additional 20% tariffs targeting specific imports, including those linked to issues like fentanyl control. 25% tariffs implemented during Trump's first term on nearly all Chinese products. This total, roughly 55%, is the actual level affecting American imports from China. Meanwhile, China maintains an average of 10% tariffs on U.S. goods. So, the trade truce doesn't mean tariffs disappeared. It simply pauses new increases. Now, let's look at the impact on Chinese manufacturing. According to reports from Reuters and other financial analysts, U.S. tariffs have had a significant effect on Chinese industrial production and labor conditions. Many factories have had to reduce shifts, cut wages, or hire temporary workers to stay competitive. Some companies have shifted to a 6-day workweek without increasing pay, effectively lowering labor costs to offset the impact of tariffs. Even with this, the data shows that China's exports to the U.S. dropped 21.7% in July compared to last year, illustrating the pressure tariffs create. At the same time, China has redirected exports to other markets, including the EU, Australia, and ASEAN nations. Exports to these regions grew between 9% and 16%, partially due to rerouting products originally intended for the U.S., a practice known as transshipment. In other words, Chinese goods are shipped through other countries to bypass U.S. tariffs. However, this workaround is becoming increasingly difficult. Many ASEAN countries, including Vietnam and Cambodia, have signed trade agreements with the U.S. that limit the ability to re-export Chinese goods without facing tariffs. Similarly, the EU has strict rules to combat transshipment of Chinese industrial products. So while exports to other regions have grown recently, this may not be sustainable long-term. One crucial aspect often overlooked is the impact on Chinese workers. Economic data and expert analysis suggest that Chinese industrial workers are bearing the brunt of the trade war. Even as GDP growth hovers around 5% and exports show nominal increases, workers face reduced hours and unpaid leave, wage stagnation or reductions, greater job insecurity due to factory slowdowns and cost-cutting measures. Meanwhile, consumer confidence is low, retail sales are sluggish, inflation remains near zero, and domestic demand is weak. Essentially, the Chinese economy appears resilient on the surface, but many citizens and small businesses are feeling the negative effects. For American audiences, this is a critical point. The U.S. tariffs are working as intended. They pressure China to reduce over-reliance on exports and push toward rebalancing its economy toward domestic consumption. Rather than relying solely on selling cheap goods abroad, former Finance Minister Yellen has emphasized that the goal isn't just reducing the trade deficit, it's changing the structure of China's economy. What does this mean for American consumers and businesses? Here's a breakdown. Consumers may face slightly higher prices on certain imports, but these tariffs are designed to level the playing field and support U.S. manufacturers. U.S. companies importing from China may need to adjust supply chains or negotiate lower prices with Chinese suppliers. Long-term, these tariffs aim to encourage China to invest more in domestic demand, creating a more balanced global trade system. Looking forward, the next 90 days will be critical. Both countries must continue high-level trade negotiations, monitor compliance with agreements on rare earths and other strategic materials, assess whether temporary measures like paused tariffs help create a path toward a more stable trade relationship. It's important to note that trade tensions aren't fully resolved. The truce extends the pause, but fundamental issues remain, including intellectual property protections, industrial subsidies, and structural reforms in China's economy. In summary, here's what American viewers should take away. 1. The U.S.-China trade truce is real but limited. Existing tariffs remain, but new increases are paused for 90 days. 2. Chinese media may spin this as a victory for China, but the real effects of U.S. tariffs on Chinese production, wages, and exports are significant. 3. For American businesses and consumers, the pause offers stability and predictability, but tariffs will continue to influence pricing and supply chains. 4. The ultimate goal of U.S. trade policy is to reshape China's economic model, encouraging domestic consumption and reducing dependence on cheap exports. This is a complex situation with short-term pauses but long-term consequences. Both sides are navigating strategic interests, economic pressures, and domestic political considerations. While headlines may suggest compromise or victory, the reality is that the trade war's effects are ongoing, and American audiences should understand the depth and nuances behind the numbers. That wraps up our breakdown of Trump's latest executive order and its implications. Stay tuned, because the next 90 days could reveal critical developments in the U.S.-China trade relationship. And as always, we'll keep bringing you clear, detailed analysis that goes beyond the headlines.